Before this story disappears into silence, hit subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment, because once you see what the cameras caught inside Rikers Island, you won't look at prison walls the same way again. The night it began, the rain came down in sheets over the East River, turning the lights of Rikers Island into smeared reflections on black water. At 2:17 a.m., a corrections officer on routine patrol stopped in front of cell block 4C. The radio crackled once, then went dead. When backup arrived minutes later, they found an inmate collapsed on the concrete floor, eyes open, lips tinged blue. No signs of a fight. No blood. Just a body cooling fast in one of the most heavily monitored facilities in America. By dawn, the unit was locked down. Phones confiscated. Doors sealed. Word spread fast among inmates, faster than the guards could control it. A death without witnesses inside a prison like Rikers was a problem. A death without a clear cause was a nightmare. Detective Marcus Hale arrived just after sunrise, his coat still damp from the rain. Hale had worked homicides for nearly 2 decades, long enough to know when something felt wrong. This felt wrong. The dead inmate was identified as Thomas Keller, 34, serving 8 years for armed robbery. No known enemies. No recent write-ups. According to his file, he'd been quiet. Too quiet. Medical staff initially suggested a medical episode. A heart condition, maybe? But Hale wasn't convinced. Keller's bunkmate had been moved hours earlier for questioning in an unrelated case. Keller had been alone. And alone deaths were often the hardest to explain. The warden wanted it wrapped up fast. Rikers was already under scrutiny. Another scandal could ignite public outrage. Hale pushed back. He requested full access to surveillance footage from the tier. Every camera. Every angle. That's when the first problem surfaced. Between 1:48 a.m. and 2:03 a.m., the cameras outside cell 4C glitched. Not completely blacked out, but distorted. Frames skipped. Audio dropped. 15 minutes of visual static in a system designed to never blink. Inside the control room, technicians blamed old wiring. Power fluctuations. Hale didn't buy it. In his experience, technology rarely failed at the exact moment someone needed it most, unless someone helped it fail. As the hours passed, more questions surfaced. Keller had received a phone call earlier that evening. The recording was missing. Logged, but not saved. A corrections officer assigned to the tier had taken an unscheduled break during the same window the cameras glitched. When questioned, he claimed he'd felt sick. There was no medical report to back it up. Hale began talking to inmates. Most refused to speak. A few whispered half-truths. One name surfaced more than once, Eli Navarro. A longtime Rikers inmate, known for running favors, trading protection, and knowing things he shouldn't. Navarro and Keller weren't listed as associates, but in prison, paperwork rarely told the real story. When Hale finally sat across from Navarro in the interview room, the man smiled without warmth. "Cameras don't lie," Navarro said calmly. "People do." That night, Hale stayed late, watching footage frame by frame. At 1:56 a.m., just before the distortion peaked, a camera inside the tier briefly stabilized. For less than 3 seconds, it caught something the technicians had missed. Keller, standing at the bars of his cell. Not panicking. Not fighting. Talking. His face was pressed close to the metal, eyes locked on someone just out of frame. His lips moved slowly, deliberately, as if choosing every word carefully. There was no audio, but Hale knew what he was seeing. A confession. And when they enhanced the image and tracked the shadow standing outside the cell, Hale felt his stomach drop, because the silhouette didn't belong to an inmate. It belonged to someone who was never supposed to be there. By the time Detective Hale left the control room, the sun had dipped behind the gray outline of the city, and Rikers Island felt less like a facility and more like a trap. The silhouette from the footage replayed in his mind: broad shoulders, a straight back stance, a posture trained by authority. Not an inmate. Staff. Or someone pretending to be. Hale requested personnel logs immediately. Access records? Keycard swipes. Anyone who had been near cell block 4C during the blackout window. The list came back longer than expected. Too many names. Too many gaps. Someone had been cleaning the trail. Then the first witness vanished. An inmate named Jonah Price, housed 2 tiers down, had quietly asked to speak with investigators that afternoon. He told a junior officer he'd heard voices during the blackout, one calm, one shaking. He never made it to the interview room. During evening count, his bunk was empty. No transfer paperwork. No medical escort. Just gone. The warden called it a clerical error. Hale called it obstruction. Pressure mounted from above. City officials wanted reassurance. The press wanted answers. Hale was warned, politely, but firmly, to tread carefully. Rikers had a way of swallowing people who dug too deep. That night, Hale reviewed Keller's file again, slower this time. Buried beneath disciplinary reports and intake forms was a sealed note marked confidential. It referenced an ongoing cooperation agreement. Keller had been talking, to prosecutors, to internal affairs, maybe both. He wasn't just an inmate. He was leverage. The confession caught on camera wasn't about the crime that put Keller behind bars. It was about something happening inside the prison. Hale finally got access to the missing phone metadata. The call Keller received hours before his death traced back to a burner phone registered under a fake name. But the cell tower ping placed it inside the facility. Someone on the inside had made that call. When Hale confronted Eli Navarro again, the man's confidence cracked, just slightly. "You don't kill a man like Keller for nothing," Navarro said quietly. "You kill him to shut him up." "Who was he talking about?" Hale asked. Navarro leaned back, eyes flicking toward the dark mirror on the wall. "Not who," he said. "How many?" The next morning, Internal Affairs arrived unannounced. Laptops seized. Logs locked. The investigation was no longer just about Keller, it was about Rikers itself. Hale noticed something else too. Certain officers avoided eye contact. Others watched him too closely. Fear traveled faster than guilt. Then the second shock hit. A maintenance worker reviewing archived feeds discovered an unindexed camera, an old hallway unit slated for removal but still quietly recording. The footage was grainy, the angle imperfect, but it covered a service corridor near cell block 4C. At 1:54 a.m., 2 minutes before the main cameras glitched, a figure walked into frame wearing a guard's uniform. The badge number was obscured. The face partially shadowed. But the walk was unmistakable. Calm. Purposeful. At 2:02 a.m., the same figure exited the corridor, alone. No emergency call. No sign of distress. Just a man walking away from a death that hadn't yet been discovered. Hale froze the frame and zoomed in on the shoulder patch. It wasn't standard issue. It belonged to a specialized internal transport unit, one rarely used, and tightly controlled. Only 5 officers on the island had access to that uniform. Before Hale could pursue it, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop now. Or the next body won't be an inmate." Moments later, alarms blared across the compound. A lockdown order echoed through loudspeakers. In the chaos, Hale received confirmation that one of the 5 officers with access to the uniform had just failed to report for duty. Officer Daniel Cross. As Hale rushed toward the administration wing, another message appeared on his screen, this time with a still image attached. It was Keller's face at the cell bars, clearer than Hale had ever seen it before. And written beneath it were 4 words that changed the case forever. "He told us everything." The manhunt for Officer Daniel Cross unfolded under a veil of controlled panic. Officially, he was listed as on leave. Unofficially, every bridge off Rikers was watched, every ferry logged, every camera scanned for a man trained to disappear in plain sight. Hale knew Cross wasn't running blindly. He was calculating. Waiting. What broke the stalemate wasn't force. It was fear. At 3:41 a.m., a call came in from an abandoned warehouse in Hunts Point. A payphone, rare, almost extinct, had been used to dial internal affairs directly. The voice on the line was shaking, breath ragged, but deliberate. "I didn't kill him," the man said. "But I was there." Cross had surfaced. Hale arrived to find Cross sitting on a crate beneath a single flickering bulb, his uniform discarded, hands trembling despite years of discipline. He looked smaller than the man in the footage. Older. Cornered. Cross didn't deny being at cell block 4C. He admitted to the blackout. He admitted to the missing phone call. But when Hale asked why Keller had died, Cross broke. "There was a list," Cross said. "Names. Guards. Supervisors. External contacts. Keller was recording everything: bribes, staged assaults, fake medical emergencies used to move contraband. He was promised protection. A transfer. He thought the cameras would keep him alive." Cross confessed to confronting Keller, demanding the list. He swore. Keller collapsed mid-sentence, clutching his chest. Panic followed. Orders came through a channel Cross refused to name. Clean the footage. Control the narrative. Let the death look natural. But Hale had already seen too much. The autopsy results arrived before dawn. Keller hadn't died of a heart condition. He'd been poisoned, slow-acting, colorless, nearly untraceable unless you knew what to look for. The toxin was administered hours before his collapse. Cross hadn't killed Keller. He had only been sent to hear the confession and make sure it never reached daylight. When confronted with the evidence, Cross went silent. He stared at the concrete floor and whispered, "You don't understand. This doesn't end with me." He was right. Within weeks, indictments followed. Several officers were arrested. A contractor vanished overseas. A deputy warden resigned quietly. The press called it reform. The city called it accountability. Hale called it incomplete. Because the list Keller was compiling was never recovered. The unindexed camera footage vanished from evidence storage before it could be presented in court. Jonah Price was never found. Official records listed him as transferred, though no facility claimed him. And the burner phone that started it all was traced to a shell company dissolved overnight. Cross accepted a plea deal. Reduced sentence. Protective custody. He was moved to a federal facility under a different name. The public believed the story was over. Hale didn't. 3 months later, a man was found dead in a holding cell in another state. Similar circumstances. Camera malfunction. Missing audio. No signs of struggle. The report labeled it natural causes. Hale watched the footage anyway. For 2 seconds, barely enough to register, a reflection appeared in the polished steel of the cell door. A figure standing just out of frame. Upright. Patient. Listening. Hale shut off the monitor, the room heavy with silence. Rikers Island had been exposed, but whatever Keller tried to confess was larger than one prison. Larger than one city. Some confessions don't die with the man who speaks them. They wait. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one, so subscribe now, because the cameras are always watching, and the truth has a way of coming back.